What's up guys, welcome back to my channel Anime Fiction. I'm back with a new episode of What If Naruto Was the Emperor of the Universe Part 7. And if you did enjoy this video, keep this video a like, and if you're new to my channel and like my content, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more crossover fictions with a twist. Now let's begin this new video.
Chapter 17. Silent Hill was located in West Virginia, not far from Centurion. He could use his powers to become invisible and evade detection. He had become extremely cautious after his previous confrontation with the JL. Another cause for his prudence was the Emperor's appearance. He had never heard of such a species before and didn't trust a word the creature said. Nonetheless, he was cautious because the man was handling the JL with care. Playing with Superman wasn't for the faint of heart. Centurion arrived in the ghost town to find it deserted and devoid of life. But he was already aware of it, and he could feel the spiritual surge. The massive figure in crimson and gold armor began striding casually through the streets. He was waiting for the spirit to emerge. "Come out, Alessa, or I may have to destroy this place," Valkus growled as his feet made imprints on the path. He wasn't there to recruit, but rather to force her to submit. As ashes poured down, the world became engulfed in fog, and a tiny girl with long black hair and pale skin appeared in front of him. Alessa, sometimes known as Dark Alessa, wore a purple gown and stood in front of Valkus. She was Alessa's dark side, produced by her pain. "Good. Now come along, little lady, before I get violent." Valkus smiled as he walked forward to grasp her tiny little form while releasing his spiritual aura to suppress her form. Alessa had a glum expression on her face. She could sense his spiritual force as well as the ghosts that surrounded him. It wasn't the first time she'd been forced to acquiesce. She was waiting for her excellent part to return, and these things bothered her. "The world began to twist again as I took a step back. Reality appears to be peeling away, revealing a nightmare dimension." Silent Hill, Alessa's territory, was a town divided into three realms: the normal world, the fog world, and the nightmare realm. Valkus accelerated his pace to capture the tiny brat while fully unleashing his presence, but she vanished and he was forced to dodge a cleaver slice. A man of equal stature stood by his side, wearing a massive triangular metal mask. Pyramid Head was one of Alessa's guardians. He represented the faceless guardian who kept Alessa safe. And he wasn't by himself. Valkus morphed into two figures that represented his anxieties and trauma. One was comparable in stature to Pyramid Head, with a massive buff physique and a fabric bag on his head covered with spikes. He wore plain white garments and dark leather armor over them. In his hand was a huge war axe that also functioned as a hammer, with a chain attached to the hammer part. It symbolized his dread of being executed for treason. It was a person who had troubled him since he was a child, as he had witnessed people being decapitated. The other was enormous, and its magnitude symbolized his greatest fear. The Emperor of Yellow. It was a massive figure with tentacles instead of legs that stood 2 floors tall. It wore a white mask over its face, and its eyes were a vast pool of blackness. It was a dark-skinned figure dressed in a yellow robe, a golden medallion, and a floating golden crown. Its hands were enormous and pointed, and tentacles protruded from the robe's arm area and even its abdomen. The figure symbolized his dread of being dominated by someone else, a greater authority that makes him feel weak. It embodied his innermost anxieties about futility and helplessness. Tentacles were limbs that spread out to control its prey. Valkus had never felt fear before, but he could feel his heart racing at the moment. Alessa had reawakened his terror, and the presence of the two animals reminded him of his horrific history. "Fucking whore!" shouted Valkus as his ghost army was summoned, along with everyone who had died while serving him. While he studied the area, thousands of soldiers on horses charged at the nightmares. "Find the maggot, now!" Valkus growled as he turned to Sadako and Kayako, evading the Yellow Emperor with his hand.
Sadako possessed spatial manipulation abilities, whilst Kayako went one step further by being able to mark and follow people.
The collar around their necks obliged the two ghost women to obey the command. Sadako linked to all of the town's televisions and discovered a target. She was driven back into the digital realm after emerging from the TV by Dark Alessa. Kayako was likewise going to start working until Valkus intervened. Valkus commanded as he lost contact with Sadako, "Stop, just help me with this abomination." Angan was a 5-meter-tall enormous creature with the ability to alter its crimson blood-like body in any direction and poison victims. It battled Pyramid Head, while Angelica and Ace faced the Executioner. Angelica was one of the Terror Titans assembled by the Clock King to battle the Teen Titans. The man murdered her. She was a woman who despised other women. Regardless, she was a powerful entity capable of disrupting gravity and negating kinetic energy. She then experienced energy projection. Ace Masterson was an elderly man known as the Human Dynamo. He wasn't a criminal, but rather a man who wanted to be a crime fighter and ended up experimenting on his own body. He was changed into a living battery that could absorb and manipulate electromagnetic waves. He understood he had dementia and could become a menace, so he hired Deathstroke to assassinate him and give him a warrior's death. The two were stuck facing one of his nightmares while the rest battled his greatest fear. Aben Sur was an alien entity who served as a Green Lantern before Hal Jordan died and became the Green Lantern. Zatara was Zatanna's father, who was killed in the line of duty while fighting the darkness. He had said his daughter farewell, but his death was also the cause of Zatanna and John Constantine's breakup. John was the only one who survived the conflict, and others dealt with the issue of the darkness. Regardless, Zatara was a gifted magician who had fallen into servitude. Everyone was concentrating on evading the big monster's tentacles. The Yellow Emperor could control the mind by coiling its targets, and its body was impenetrable. To make matters worse, it may recover instantly. Valkus couldn't keep his cool in the presence of the monster and flew about the battlefield avoiding its touch. It was smiling at him, looking down on him. "Vanish!" yelled Valkus as he released a blast of light. Valkus, like Moon Maiden, derived his abilities from the same source. Valkus could draw power from the sun, but not in the same way as Superman could. He could only use light to fight, not grow stronger as a result of it. When YE extended its hand, a dark barrier appeared to prevent his attack. The others attacked at the same time. Sur employed his lantern powers, which had been diminished by the lack of the genuine ring. He shot the target with a beam cannon he built. Zatara cast spells, emitted fireballs, and formed ethereal chains to capture their target. Finally, Kayako used her space manipulation skills to appear within the YE's robe. She attempted to drag him into her evil dimension. But it was all for naught. YE was his worst worry, and it was feeding on his terror alongside Alessa's abilities. She was pleased with YE and made the decision to retain him. He smirked as he used his other hand to block Sur's blow. His tentacles penetrated through him and destroyed all of Zatara's assaults. He turned around and looked Kayako in the eyes. Kayako was a human woman who was murdered by her husband. The current form was the grudge left behind in the moment of her death, coupled with all the dark spirits her human form had consumed before death, as well as the subsequent soul consumptions. Anyone else who looked into her eyes would have a heart attack before their soul was devoured. YE smirked before more tentacles curled around Kayako, attempting to drag her within, came from its mouth.
It became a race to see who could eat first. "Converge, my loyal slaves, let us become one," Valkus said, seeing that they weren't making any progress on the object. He wanted to calm down, so he gathered all of his faithful warriors inside of him.
He felt peaceful and could think clearly with those spirits.
He was dressed in ethereal armor and rode an ethereal horse while wielding a long lance and a shield. He prevented Kayako from being consumed by gathering all of them and combining all of their skills into one body. He allowed the others to deal with minor diversions while battling YE. With a single command, ethereal shackles sprang from the ground and the air to entrap his adversary.
"Finish him," Alessa said, and he raised his hand to the sky, revealing a blade in his hand. Valkus continued his attack, throwing his lance after focusing his abilities on it. It was a strike that should have destroyed all of his hurdles, but it vanished with YE's slash.
Valkus retreated fast in order to dodge the onslaught, but chains curled around his legs.
When he looked back, he noticed that Pyramid Head was the only one on the battlefield in the back. He had consumed the Executioner and his slaves, absorbing their characteristics. The opponent dragged him down and sliced him with his massive blade, but Valkus deflected the strike with his shield. The impact blasted him into the street, causing a crater to develop. The little fight had wrecked the entire area, but it didn't matter. Valkus yelled in rage as the two horrors approached him and pushed through the nightmare realm to leave Silent Hill. Dark Alessa desired to accompany him, but Alessa was tired and needed to rest. He was fortunate to escape to the real world. Valkus trembled as he looked down on the cursed town before fleeing. He despised Alessa and the Light for betraying them. They hadn't told him everything, and he hadn't been instructed to expect such power. "You worms shall pay for this sacrilege," Valkus vowed as he fled to rest after the combat. He had suffered greatly and was almost corrupted by Alessa. The Light had not intended to take him in, as Valkus had inferred. They were only using him to put Enma and Alessa to the test. Their intended victims were these two ladies. Valkus was a longtime foe, and the Light had no wish to maintain such disloyal filth among them. When Valkus gained his powers, he murdered his emperor and betrayed everyone who had worked with him. His devotion was skewed. He was a deadly snake who couldn't be trusted. None of the members were unaware of his goal to dominate the organization. He was powerful, but the two ladies were more so. The Light wanted to test their abilities and see what they could do to persuade them. Alessa appeared to despise humanity as a whole, which needed to be addressed or she would perish. The Light worked to make humanity a dominant force in the universe. However, their methods were immoral, and they did not care about the citizens. Naruto returned to Silent Hill while walking around the town. One of his clones had detected the movement of an invisible figure and followed it. Naruto followed and saw Centurion, so he chose to concentrate on him. The man was powerful and would cause him problems. Naruto decided to alert the JL about the opponent and leave him in their care. Unfortunately for Valkus, his war did not finish when he left Silent Hill. He had just begun another round when he was confronted with Moon Maiden, Hawkgirl, and Martian Manhunter. Naruto wandered around but was unable to enter the fog or nightmare realms. His control over space was insufficient to open portals to other realms, and Alessa refused to let him in. Naruto had no worries, therefore the nightmare realm would have no effect on him, and she didn't want to fight in vain. "I know you're there, and I'll come back for you. Never give up hope, and never take the wrong path. The world is full of both good and bad. Don't drown in the darkness for the few who surround your innocent existence, Alessa," Naruto grumbled as he vanished. Gia provided him with the name and data. She appeared to assist him mildly at various moments, and he had no idea what her purpose was. She desired that he murder the Olympians, purify the world, or simply watch him act. He wasn't sure, but he didn't mind using her for his advantage, and one day she'd submit like the rest. Naruto departed Silent Hill and began another of his ideas. He desired to make another public appearance that was diametrically opposed to his true shape. It would be okay to the present JL because he intended to interact positively with these folks. His true self would continue to exist alongside the new personalities created by Marvel Comics. Naruto was used to it because his teachers had forced him to create clones that took on different appearances and even acted in that manner totally. It assisted him in learning various combat styles and personalities. As a result, he opted to carry on in the modern world. Naruto turned his armor to gold and showed his true appearance on the inside, adopting the name Gilgamesh. Along with them were 4 additional clones, but this time they were dressed as Marvel characters. All of the clones used full metamorphosis, therefore none of them could be linked to his own body, even if the main clone resembled him. Thor, Hulk, Human Torch, and Magneto were flying alongside him. Thor possessed lightning and wind strength. Human Torch specialized in fire, Hulk in extreme strength, and Magneto in magnetic style. Naruto knew a plethora of techniques, thus it wasn't uncommon for him to employ the majority of them. Returning to the scene, Naruto led his team to the place where he detected Valkus. The plan was well thought out, but only implementation would reveal whether or not it worked. While Naruto was leaving the Centurion, he became involved in fight with the JL. Centurion had used all of his remaining power within his body to flee Silent Hill and had lost some of his servants in the process. He was weakened in certain ways and had expended half of his energy escaping, so he wasn't in excellent form. Regardless, he was forced to fight because of Martian Manhunter. Had assailed his thoughts and nearly knocked him out of the skies. Centurion, on the other hand, may use his body in a different way and avert such a destiny. His mental hurdles were formidable, but was superior. As a result, his spiritual powers saved him. He operated with his soul while his body was transformed into a puppet, allowing him to dodge MM's mind powers.
Centurion evaded that strike, but was struck by Hawkgirl's mace and Moon Maiden's lunar blade. It was a direct hit to his chest, and the impact threw him into the grass below.
Both weapons were fantastic, particularly Hawkgirl's mace. It was built of nth metal, one of the strongest metals in the cosmos with a wide range of abilities. It allowed physical interaction with ethereal spirits, magical creatures, and even the breaking of enchantments. It was the antithesis of gravity. It allowed for self-sufficiency. It could transform into anything and increase the user's power. It could even modify reality and time and allow the user to reincarnate. It was an excellent choice for a weapon or armor. Centurion's protections were neutralized and he was damaged as a result of using such a weapon. The impact with the ground had no effect other than to create a crater and harm the surrounds. It was clear once more that superhuman combat were hazardous to the world, and the government had some legitimate concerns. It also demonstrated the heroes' and government's lack of preparation for such battles. It was only a matter of time before the planet was destroyed as a result of collateral damage. Returning to the combat, Centurion howled and screamed a horrific scream that pushed his opponents back while affecting their souls. Moon Maiden acted quickly and erected a lunar barrier, but the move got through and Hawkgirl smashed it with her mace. The strike would have succeeded if it hadn't been for the mace. Nonetheless, it was a straightforward move, and Centurion proceeded with another. Centurion used Kayako's space manipulation to launch beams from his hands to the sides, which hit his opponents quickly. The assaults were too near to their bodies to evade, and they came from behind them. The beam carried concentrated spiritual energy that had a strong effect on while Moon Maiden and Hawkgirl just had to deal with the violent impact that sent them flying into the distance. Moon Maiden may have mitigated the effect by shining with moonlight before the hit, or she would have been taken out. Regardless, she was severely hurt and focused her gravity manipulation on healing and providing support. Hawkgirl was stronger and soared back toward Centurion as her body healed from the damage. Was enraged, which was unusual given his mild nature. It happened, though, since the impact made him recall his darkest thoughts. It brought back memories of nightmares. Had been taking the fight lightly before, but now he was taking it seriously. Centurion was about to flee utilizing Kayako's skills when things went wrong again. Naruto and his squad arrived and erected a golden barrier around the battlefield. It also temporarily disabled Kayako's spatial abilities, allowing Thor to strike him with his lightning blast. Because Naruto was in Sage mode, the lightning moved 10 times faster than normal lightning and struck with such force that Centurion would have drilled through the core. However, Naruto caused the ground to become stronger, with little damage. This increased the damage done to Centurion when he was attacked by Hulk's hammer smash that followed. Hulk was the persona who used Tsunade's fighting technique, as well as Might Guy's and Choji's. Hulk combines the strength of all three. While the 8 gates were still in the works, the butterfly mode mixed with Tsunade's power style was the main focus. Naruto was attempting to combine all of his power-up abilities, but the 8 gates rendered the other techniques useless due to his inability to manage the uncontrolled chakra surge. Regardless of the 8 gates, Hulk's might was immense, capable of destroying a mountain. Centurion could definitely feel that strength as his injured body deteriorated progressively. His hair was unkempt, his bones were broken, and he was bleeding. He realized he was defeated as he looked about. There were far too many opponents, and he was far from powerful. But it appears that his luck was not all that poor, as all of his opponents were shot and he was dragged off the battlefield. Deathstroke stood with his new look just 5 kilometers from the combat. He was dressed in an advanced battle gear and clutched a big laser shooting rifle, while 6 more laser shooters floated around him. He had appeared secretly and shot the heroes from a distance with his new light-made equipment. Using space technology, the weapon shot faster than the speed of light, and its power exceeded that of a nuclear bomb. The heroes would have been out of the headlines if the weaponry power hadn't been in the works. Deathstroke vanished from the location after completing his mission, as his suit was equipped with teleportation capabilities. Even with Naruto's assistance, the battle would have ended very differently, and it was good that he hadn't emerged in his Emperor character, since failure would have severely harmed his image. Returning to the heroes, the surprise attack had been too fast for everyone but could have phased through the laser, but instead blocked it with his palm and avoided injury.
Because of the particular abilities of their armor, Moon Maiden and Hawkgirl were slightly injured by the attack, although Naruto's clones were strong enough to survive it. Naruto had detected the attack and his body could have teleported instantaneously due to his connection with nature via Sage Mode, but he had disabled that ability for these clones.
As a result, the clones were unable to respond and were struck straight in the back. Regardless, the clones were tough enough to withstand the strength of a city destroyer or a mountain eraser, and were simply pushed aside by the unexpected impact. Naruto's other clone had observed the combat from a distance and noted Deathstroke so that he would not repeat the same blunder. It wasn't his first failure, but he couldn't do it again. He'd made the mistake of staring down on a low-level power signal, oblivious to the fact that highly advanced weaponry permitted them to injure him. Nonetheless, it didn't hurt his pride because it had already been shaken by the public's knowledge, and he had adjusted. The fact that he wasn't even in the top 10 on the planet was a major setback for his ego, and it was lucky that he knew how to control it and wasn't driven by it. Naruto was once again blown away by the new world in technology. He was eager to see his team's success on the field. After everyone had finished catching their breath, they realized the adversary had vanished and focused on each other. Naruto's crew had assisted them, but they were all unknown to them. Took over and let the females recover from their injuries. With the lenses on his eyes, he observed the 4 people and logged the data. It was done by Batman to make it easier for them to collect data on every opponent they faced, as verbal accounts and recollection were untrustworthy, especially when one wasn't adept at description. "Thank you for your assistance." Approached them and spoke calmly as usual. His tone was generally neutral, but he was tremendously heated on the inside. "My name is Gilgamesh, and it is our duty to help each other." Gilgamesh was the clone with the original appearance and golden armor. His tone matched Naruto's original tone without any added sound effects. As he, my friend, said, "We were happy to finally be of use," Thor said in a cheerful tone reminiscent of Ali and contemporary Naruto's fusion. While Magneto, like Satsuki, was silent and careful, Hulk was merely a battle-crazed junkie who was uninterested in chatting, and Human Torch was acting like a cool modern guy. All of them appeared pleasant, but knew that such a thing would never happen. "What do you mean by that?" Inquired, eager to read the individuals freely. He kept his cool because others felt violated, but the ongoing difficulties had pushed his buttons over the years. And he had begun to read people's surface thoughts. He didn't go deep unless absolutely necessary. He found no bad indications throughout his preliminary search. "We've been training with our powers for a while and wanted to help out soon," Gilgamesh stated candidly. According to the script Naruto had prepared, that was the truth. The clones merely had fictitious memories and were linked to real persons working in one of the locations Naruto had visited. He had taken control of 5 people and changed their memories to match the clones in order to cover everything adequately, or else others would figure out the game. To escape detection, Naruto used his parallel mind skill to remotely control all 5 clones. "Yeah, we've been training in remote places like Z Warriors. It was horrifying. Please save us from this lunatic," Human Torch said, wrapping his arms around Thor. Finally, realized that the team was made up of meta-humans who had awoken some talent. "Thank you for responding to my query, and I hope to see you all become the guardians of this beautiful world. I wish we could have a longer conversation, but for now we have some prior arrangements," reminded them. There was no adequate system in place to care for superhumans, and informing the government about them was asking for trouble, because it would be beneath them to capture and experiment on them. Because of the government's distrustful character, all superhumans avoided it like the plague and refused to work for it unless there were extraordinary circumstances. "No problem, we'll definitely see each other," Gilgamesh said as he shook MM's hand. "Can I have your phone number?" Human Torch, on the other hand, approached Hawkgirl and asked for her phone number. Hawkgirl raised her head and shook her head. "Not my type, you look too soft, and I don't like playboys," Hawkgirl said in response to his flirtation. It was her first time in the field, but that didn't change her mind. The JL team then vanished from the field using the Watchtower's spatial powers. Naruto's crew likewise left the area, but in a usual manner because he suspected the tower had zoomed in on them. Centurion appeared far from the battlefield as the heroes dispersed. Deathstroke greeted him when he appeared on a desolate island. The island was desolate and appeared haunted, with a terrible atmosphere. It was fogged in, and there were blood spots here and there. Both fighters were unconcerned about appearances and were entirely focused on each other. Centurion fixed his gaze on the guy who had saved him. He was not grateful and was filled with distrust. "Stop glaring or I'll pop those eyeballs. Valkus, you have failed to demonstrate your importance. We gave you information to help you grow in power, but you were defeated so easily without a single accomplishment. Those powers are wasted on you," Deathstroke said harshly. They had saved Centurion to put his powers to the test before dispatching them. The Light had discovered a technique to transfer powers from one person to another and even increase those innate powers through genetic manipulation. They sought to build the ideal version of mankind and to improve upon the selected ones because present humanity could never compete with the top species in the universe. Their poor physiology was limiting their potential, and the Light was determined to correct that flaw. "How dare you? You filthy mongrel, I'll lose because of your incomplete information," Centurion raged, leaping towards Deathstroke only to be met with a barrier. "Incomplete information. Did I just heart that? Valkus, you are truly incompetent beyond belief. How did you ever delude yourself into believing you could rule over people? Your level of incompetence is truly astounding. Did you not even think for a second before barging in like a buffoon? You failed the test at the time, but we have chosen to give you another chance." Deathstroke caressed his wrath to the brink of insanity, stroking his pride. He used the gravity device to press Centurion into the ground and held his blade to his face. "One last chance, Valkus. We will not save you again. You see this island? It is filled with millions of souls blinded by rage. Take them and dispose of at least one Justice League member." Deathstroke sliced Centurion's face and left him alone. Centurion punched the earth with his fist in wrath at the humiliation, forcing the small island to quake and almost collapse. "All of you will pay for this degradation," Centurion said in a gruff tone before turning his attention to the spirits. He planned to make the most use of the available resources. "Found you," an eerie voice said, as a big hand grabbed his head. Naruto was the owner of the enormous hand, and he had discovered Centurion quickly since the man's life signal had been registered, and there was a Hiraishin, teleportation, seal on his body. Centurion had been marked by Naruto's clone in case the criminal evaded his hands. Given the circumstances, Centurion was ripe for the picking. Naruto's clone had 50% of his chakra and was fully utilizing Sage Mode. With the fresh information he had obtained from the people, he had found a path to power where his present rival was a youngster in front of him. He had discovered a technique to greatly increase his powers, to the point where Naruto was ready to return and slap Madara around like a child. That was the ideal setting, and Naruto expected a genius like Madara to have previously discovered the same thing. Naruto had realized that he had been blind to something extremely close to him. He had never questioned or attempted to change the way body enhancement was done. After learning about nuclear bombs and other such things, he understood that he might have started at home rather than looking for bigger things to understand. He realized that even small things might have immense power, which radically transformed his perspective on growth. Naruto tested and recreated body enhancement from the ground up, taking it to a whole new level. He even went so far as to design numerous levels for future generations. Body enhancement was a basic technique recognized by all shinobi, and it was a skill that used chakra to boost the physical abilities of the body. The magnitude of the increase was determined by chakra quantity, chakra control, and chakra quality. However, this expertise just covered the surface of the body and did not reach deep. Naruto recognized his error and remedied it. He went beyond the conventional skill and coated individual cells with his chakra, implying that he strengthened his body at the cellular level. It so greatly increased his power that his prior level in his glance became fragile. He had almost 37 trillion cells in his body, therefore the energy need was huge, but so was the power-up. Naruto then advanced to the molecular stage, when he had more than 40 million molecules per cell. The upgrade was incredibly chakra-intensive, but the ultimate effect catapulted him to a level of strength beyond his wildest fantasies. It was only due to his regenerative capacity that he was able to achieve such a feat. Otherwise, he would have died before reaching the cellular level. Controlling chakra on a molecular level was incredibly challenging. It put Naruto's talent and patience to the test. As a molecule was not the smallest particle, there were more layers to construct. Atoms existed. electrons, neutrons, and protons were present. The quarks would be found deeper, followed by the preons. Each stage dramatically transformed Naruto, making the preceding level resemble a ring in the Sahara Desert. However, Naruto's chakra control was insufficient for such success, and he was even unable to fight while employing the molecular level. He had no choice but to rely on the cellular stage. Nonetheless, it was more than sufficient. The cellular stage had instantaneously increased Naruto's physical power from City Destroyer to Moon Destroyer, and this stage was still active. It was still not entirely optimized because the true cellular stage would put him on a planetary level or higher. Kyuubi, 9-tail fox, evolved from Jubi, 10-tail beast, which was created with half of the planet's energy. Kyuubi was half the size of Jubi, but that was the regular form. Super Kyuubi was the same size as Jubi. Kyuubi had half a planet's worth of energy, and Naruto had a quarter of that in chakra reserves. Naruto's body had an enormous amount of energy, but he had always lacked the methods to completely harness such energy, and now he had found a solution. The phases of power not only affected his body, but also all of his techniques. It increased the potency of all his skills because Naruto was building them up from a tiny level, implying that a single basketball-sized fireball may hold power greater than his best assault. Naruto's chakra was no longer being divided into trillions of cells for a great synergic effect, and using it with Sage Mode meant that his base would be increased, and his cells would adapt and alter. As a result, his development would continue. Returning to the situation, Centurion was unable to respond after hearing the voice and was smashed into the ground. He was almost killed by the force of the hit. Naruto had traveled faster than light, and the ground beneath them had also been improved on a cellular level, else the island would have been obliterated by the collision. Centurion was unable to resist and had his bones broken due to his injured body. He was barely aware as he attempted to communicate through his damaged windpipe. Naruto lifted him up while holding his head, allowing Centurion to view his features. Centurion trembled with horror as he recognized Naruto's armored form and realized the threat. Naruto was pleased with the outcome of his training and eager to perfect it. With this capability, he now had a legitimate fighting chance in the modern world. Naruto began the customary procedure of reading his foe's mind, filled with joy. Centurion had the best mental resistance, but it had been weakened by the pounding, whereas Naruto's powers had been boosted by his discoveries. Even his mental abilities were altered to follow his new path, allowing him to defeat Centurion. Naruto saw his past and truly understood him. Centurion was a Roman Empire official who lived till the modern era with the goal of ruling the world. But there have always been forces that have made that goal unattainable. The man was arrogant and cowardly, but he was determined and never gave up on his aim. His abilities were also intriguing. He had the ability to manipulate spirits and a body that was stronger than Naruto's base strength. Naruto might employ such people to bolster his base strength and alter his genetic constitution. Centurion would be an excellent servant. All of this, though, was dependent on the man. His perseverance may take him to his end destination. How does it feel, Valkus? This is how your victims felt, Naruto whispered as he forced Valkus to look him in the eyes. It was the first time the Colossus felt little in front of someone. In front of the Emperor, he felt frail and feeble. Such muscle and spirit were above his pay grade. That was not correct. He'd been caught off guard. He might have won if he had only had 30 minutes. Valkus returned the stare and tried fiercely to speak back while fighting the terror-inducing aura. Naruto led it because he wanted Valkus to battle him, to utterly break him and crush his excuses. Oh, you think you can win? Valkus, do you really believe you are superior to the combined will of humanity? Truly detestable. Your level of intelligence is truly detestable, Naruto said as he strolled around Valkus. However, I will let you struggle. Show me your futile efforts, Valkus, Naruto said as he stood on his back. Valkus felt his body recover instantaneously and his vitality replenished with those words. Naruto's assistance was greatly welcomed because his regen ability was slow and hindered by the fog. I will crush you like a bug for this assistance, Valkus hissed as he crawled to his feet and returned his gaze to his foe. Naruto's tone conveyed that image. Valkus, go along and play before I drag you down to hell. With a flick of his palm, Valkus was sent into the air and had to stop himself from flying off the island. Normally, he would have tried to flee, but he had already lost too many times and couldn't take any more humiliation. He had the opportunity to rise in prominence, but escape was not certain. Valkus focused on his task and made the spirits his servants, allowing his adversary to wallow in his hubris. He absorbed them all and merged them into 10 super spirits. He fed 1 super spirit to Kayako, 1 to Zatara, and 1 to Abe and Sur in order to power up these powerful spirits and allow them to reach a new level of power or restore some of their original power. Valkus summoned all of the spirits into his body to confront Naruto, resulting in a massive strength boost. He was certain that his adversary would beg for compassion. He was confident that he could bring Superman to his knees. I hope you're finished preparing, Valkus. I'm a very busy person, so consider it an honor that you got such a tight deadline. Naruto had pondered for 30 minutes while Valkus was preparing, which meant Naruto was stronger than when he came. HMPH, your arrogance has blinded you. Can't you see the difference in our power? You will kneel and beg before your slow demise, Valkus said confidently as he approached Naruto with a slim ethereal sword. Naruto laughed at his arrogance. It was hilarious. You have a talent for theatrics, perhaps you should have applied for it instead, Naruto said as he smashed the soul blade with his hand. Valkus turned from cocky to afraid in an instant, as he discovered a hand shoved through him. Rasen Shuriken Naruto utilized his wind manipulation skills to produce tiny wind blades that targeted all of Valkus's cells while keeping him conscious. The man felt the agony of being ripped apart but not dying as Naruto continued to cure him. It continued for a minute. Do you see the difference between then and now? I am sure you realized your mistake, and realized that there was never a competition. You are just a bug that can be crushed at any time. Naruto sat on an earthen throne, while Valkus was bound to a pillar. Valkus could only hear the words in silence since he was afraid to speak. His terror of the emperor had been reawakened once more. He had been tortured by his emperor throughout the Roman Empire, and it had instilled in him a deep terror that had never gone away because he had not defeated the source. Naruto was far worse than his source of anxiety and increased his terror. Valkus had succumbed without a fight, and there was no doubt about it. Good, now you're thinking correctly. Valkus, you don't have to stop dreaming. I can make you the ruler of an empire, not a small one, but one larger than your imagination. I intend for humanity to spread across the universe, and I will give talented individuals sectors to manage, each sector being a solar system. How does that sound? Isn't it mouthwatering? Naruto told Valkus about his dream. It was something he had just recently considered, yet it was the most likely path for his travel. Valkus blinked, taking in the scene. It was far more than he had hoped for. He desired a planet and received a solar system despite the fact that it was common for him to die at the time. I am willing to do it. Naruto already knew the answer, which was made easy by his knowledge of the object of their greed. Naruto rose from his seat and placed his hand on the servant's head. That's good, but now you must suffer the consequences of your actions, Naruto remarked as he began the punishment and removed Valkus off the island. Because Naruto's new powers were still in the experimental stage when they left, the island crumbled into dust. Despite Naruto's great caution, his battle had been captured by enemy forces. As they watched him dominate Centurion, the Light got a first-hand look at his abilities. Clarion the Witch Boy used magic beyond Naruto's skills to accomplish this. They chose to observe and examine the new entity rather than intervene. They had heard everything in the interview, but they still wanted to see him in action. They wanted to explore if they could collaborate because their goals were comparable. The members of Light were not collected in one spot and were not watching through a screen. They all materialized as shadow holograms in a central area where they watched the magical screen and met as usual. They had many bases all throughout the world, all of which were outfitted with some level of high-tech equipment. That idiot was asking for it, and his stupid face looked even more idiotic with those cringy dialogues, Clarion mumbled as he watched Centurion's retarded performance.
Clarion was a Croatian, a race that was a cross between humans and Sheeta. Melmoth, king of Sheeta, had created the first witch men and witch women through interbreeding with humans at Roanoke. Clarion Bleak was born in Limbo Town, where the former residents of Roanoke supposedly disappeared centuries ago. He grew up in a perverted version of Purania, where necromancy was common and in fact was a vital staple of the local industry, and every witch man, which woman, and which child had their own familiar. Clarion had always thought there was a world beyond when his true father had vanished years before, but was strongly discouraged from questioning inquiries by the stern submissionary Judah. When a Sheeta spine rider appeared in Limbo Town one day, Judah and his fellow submissionaries panicked, certain that the spine rider had been sent in advance of their annihilation. They turned into Horrigals, a monstrous gestalt form that linked the three of them with their familiars. They then attacked all of the town's witch men, including Clarion's stepfather Ezekiel. Clarion, who had discovered the Horrigal and attempted to warn everyone, was chased by the monster and escaped higher. He was separated from Cheel, his familiar, throughout the process. He had various adventures in the human realm before returning to his, sparing them from annihilation. Clarion, on the other hand, was restless and couldn't abide living a routine existence. So he returned to Earth and began hunting for entertainment. Lex Luthor approached Clarion with a proposal, and he agreed because it was incredibly interesting and fascinating. He was part human, so the Light had no objections to his inclusion, and Clarion was highly powerful, adding to the group's magical arsenal. He could definitely become a good comedian, Joker said, seeing Centurion's performance as a joke. Even the insane jester was there, but he had a purpose and wasn't just there to make people laugh. The Joker was one of the most insane beings in the universe, and it was his craziness that the Light intended to exploit. He was unpredictable and showed them a path that was out of the ordinary for normal people, implying that he was one of their strategists and also assisted in breaking people. Joker was an adept at mind control and torture, which allowed him to brainwash people.
He was an unsuccessful stand-up comedian with a wife named Jeannie before becoming the Joker. Jeannie was expecting their first child, but owing to his terrible background, he became erratic and psychologically unstable. Fearing for her life and the life of their pregnant child, Jeannie went to the police, who assisted her in faking her death and fleeing to Alaska to avoid her husband. The man who would become the Joker learned that his wife and child had died, forcing him to have one bad day.
Many years passed. Jeannie and her son continued to live in peace in Alaska, neither of them understanding where they had landed in life. Bruce Wayne, who had met the comedian before he became the Joker, was aware of her actual fate and kept it hidden to protect her and her son. As a result, he was also forced to conceal the true identity of the Joker.
He used to be a kind man who had been abused since infancy and lived in a gloomy environment. His mind was held together by a thin thread called family, and when they left, he snapped. He snapped and murdered those who had beaten him. He gradually slid into utter insanity from that point on. He couldn't believe it was real and treated it as such.
He had forgotten about his family and had become numb unless he was messing with other people's lives.
His reality was a lie to him. It was only a narrative to be enjoyed, so he made sure to keep the audience entertained.
Aside from these two juvenile members, the remainder were mostly serious people with a high level of intellect as their distinguishing feature. There was the Light's leader, Alexander Joseph Luthor, also known as Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor was the brilliant, egotistical metropolis businessman who had served as both an opponent and an ally to Superman and the Justice League through his corporation LexCorp and technically superior warsuit.
Lex established himself as a troubleshooter from the start. When he began intercepting signals from an extraterrestrial craft dubbed the Brain Interacting Construct, he initiated a conversation, exchanging facts about Earth for alien scientific expertise. He was persuaded by an unknown donor into a convenient alliance with General Lane of Project Steel Soldier and Glenn Glenmorgan, Metropolis corporate overlord, against Superman. Luthor, on the other hand, betrayed Lane and Glenmorgan by taking the kryptonite the trio intended to use and leaking their plot to a reporter called Clark Kent. He attempted to assist Brainiac during the shrinkage of Metropolis, but there was little evidence in the aftermath, so the government was compelled to let him go. Luthor spent the next several years filling the power vacuum left by Glenmorgan in Metropolis. He provoked the American invasion of Karak 4 years after the establishment of the Justice League in order to sell his super weapons to the army. That was also the year he saw Superman for the first time and was detained by the hero, resulting in a facial scar across the left side of his face. Luthor was imprisoned for a year, during which time Superman would pay him visits to inquire about a particularly alarming technological calamity. His prison sentence, however, did not last long, and he was back in business with more influence than ever. Lex formed a group to lead humanity after seeing that he alone was insufficient. His pride would not allow him to sit back and watch other species diminish humanity, therefore the light was born. The heroes were a nuisance and a plague to them, causing humanity to stagnate due to over-reliance. Humanity had become reliant on them and had not even attempted to solve the core problem on their own. Lex identified individuals who may benefit the organization and contribute. Even before Lex Luthor, Ultra-Humanite was Superman's first regular foe. The Ultra-Humanite has the most agile and learned brain on Earth, as a result of a scientific experiment. He was one of the greatest criminal minds of all time. Unfortunately for him, his physical brain interface never advanced while his mind's energies continued to develop and spread, even developing low-level mind energy abilities such as telepathy. His body began progressively burning out due to his inability to manage the mental impulses. In his early days, he was a little, elderly, crippled scientist who fought Superman with his brains, inventions, and a slew of front men and stooges. The Ultra-Humanite's most notable accomplishment was surgically transferring his brain into different bodies. But that wasn't enough. He required a stronger physique to manage his growing abilities. As a result, he met Brain and transplanted his brain into a modified silver gorilla. With that, he stepped into a new domain of physical and mental strength. It improved all of his abilities, and he began working with Brain before both of them were hired by Lex. He was a man who was passionate about experimentation and shared the group's vision. He had experienced humanity's limitations and was now ready to create the ultimate human form. He was, nevertheless, immensely ambitious and wished to govern all of humanity. He, like the other members, did not consider himself to be a subordinate and considered himself as an equal to everyone else. The Brain was a brilliant scientist, capable of reverse engineering the cobra venom and using it to strengthen Indian fauna. He also has sadistic tendencies, as proven by the surgical removal of his victims' brains while they were still alive. The Brain has an unusual speech pattern in which he talks English with a heavy French accent and frequently code switches, throwing French words into the mix. He does so because he dislikes speaking English. The Brain was basically a disembodied brain that was kept alive under a mechanical dome. Previously, he appeared as a scraggy, towering man with unkempt black hair and dark eyes. His new robot body was outfitted with retractable mechanical appendages that enabled him to manipulate things and weapons. The robot body had been improved after joining the Light, giving him plenty of reasons to follow the group, as he realized the advantages of their collaboration. The Brain was one of the unknown leaders of a group of scientists who arrived in Biwanda in 2008 to undertake research on the local gorillas. As a sadistic display of ridicule, the scientists created a compound of laboratories called Gorilla City, and proceeded to enslave a whole troop of gorillas. They restrained the gorillas with inhibitor collars and upgraded them with brain surgeries and cobra venom, implying that the Brain commanded an army of super gorillas armed with high-tech weaponry. Following the two scientists was one of the warriors from the Black Manta squad. Aquaman's archenemy was Black Manta. He was an Ocean Master agent at first, but subsequently became one of the Light's leaders.
Black Manta was a black guy with high cheekbones and graying hair around the temples. He had a tiny ring beard. Black Manta's outfit was distinguished by a manta-shaped head with two big, intimidating red eyes from which he could shoot plasma beams. There were little tubes connecting the back of the head to his shoulders. His suit's hands were webbed, and he had fins on each of his legs. He has pockets in his outfit that allowed him to shoot rockets.
The Suited had undergone extensive modification since joining the squad, and he was confident that it was more than enough to dominate his foe. But he chose patience because Aquaman had the support of the Justice League and Manta wasn't up to the challenge. The youngster who became Black Manta was an autistic adolescent who grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and enjoyed playing by the sea. He was kidnapped as a child and forced to labor aboard a ship for an undefined period of time. He supposedly saw Aquaman with his dolphin companions at one time and tried to signal for aid, but he was not seen. He was eventually obliged to defend himself, killing one of his tormentors aboard the ship with a knife. The child was determined to become the master of the emotionless water, and Aquaman, whom he considered as its representative. When he was admitted to a mental institution for his affliction, his attendants were nasty to him. The youngster described being immersed in water as heavenly bliss, whereas the softness of his bed's cotton linens bore tremendous anguish for him. The staff would still bind him to the bed and suffocate him with pillows until he passed out to muffle his screams of pain. The youngster could scarcely communicate, generally repeating a few words like, "love swim." The physicians began attempting experimental therapies on the boy, trials that appeared to inflict him pain. One of these studies was so good that he was able to speak in full sentences. Using his newly acquired skill to appear normal, the child put his doctor at ease enough for him to untie him. After that, the youngster used the syringe that had been used to help him talk to murder the doctor and flee. As an adult, he created a costume, a black wetsuit with a bug-eyed helmet capable of shooting blasting rays from its eyes, and a high-tech submersible inspired by black manta rays. He and his masked army became a force to be reckoned with after adopting the name Black Manta. Manta became a threat to Aquaman and will do anything to destroy Atlantis. He was a vicious jerk who would murder everyone who got in his way. Black Manta was strong, determined, and led his men with authority. He has demonstrated a dislike for any failure or mistake, and chastises his men for any shortcomings. If things do not go as planned, Black Manta may lose his cool. As the group's muscle, his strength and expertise were invaluable. Manta, like the other warriors, was enthralled by the new innovations and talents. He was primarily concerned with the ocean. Ra's al Ghul founded the League of Assassins and the League of Shadows, two organizations of lethal warriors he used to purge the world of evil. Because of the League's harsh practices, he was a sworn opponent of Batman. Ra's had been able to live for thousands of years and gained extensive skill in a variety of professions because to his continual use of a Lazarus pit. He was a guy of immense knowledge and intelligence, with contacts all around the world. Not a single detail had slipped his notice. He was one of the Light's primary leaders, and he contributed with his methods and shadows, who were skilled assassins, intelligence gatherers, and kidnappers. He had reached the same conclusion and agreed with the vision after meeting Lex. Humanity in its existing state was too limiting and frail. Their demise was a matter of time, and it was certain due to the way the world was evolving. He, like the rest of the group, had progressed beyond his early prowess as he let go of his fears of genetic manipulation. Slade Wilson, also known as Deathstroke, was among the muscles in the group. The man was a mercenary of the highest caliber, widely regarded as the world's greatest and deadliest assassin. He was a weapon expert, and with the Light's assistance, he had become a menace to superhumans. Deathstroke performed his duty with calm and efficiency. When he is truly challenged, the dispassionate facade slips and a degree of frustration shows through. He also enjoys the excitement of battle and gets a sick pleasure in tormenting his opponents. Deathstroke was likewise ambitious, planning to take a seat at the table, at the helm of the Light. He genuinely cared about his children and wished to make the world a better place for them in his own way. He'd been on the battlefield for so long and made so many enemies that it was hard for him to live a normal life. He was one of the Titan's most vexing foes and had often chastised Batman. Deathstroke stood tall and slim, with long white hair and a thick beard. He was blind in one eye and wore an eye patch, while the other was blue. He wore mostly black and gray armor, with goldenrod greaves and gauntlets. He was dressed in a goldenrod mask with a black portion covering the right half of his face, including his missing eye. On his back, he donned a utility belt with pockets and sheaths for a sword and gun. Vandal Savage was the other main member of the group. Vandal Savage, born Vander Adg, is a prehistoric supervillain who lives forever. Vander Adg was born as the chief's son in the 47th millennia BCE in what would become the Périgord Noir region of France. There was a territorial dispute between his Neanderthal clan and a group of Cro-Magnons one spring. However, a bright shooting star halted the fighting, allowing Vander to murder the opposing chieftain. His father claimed the assassination, and when the clan went to witness the falling shooting star, his father claimed that as well. But Vander was hurt and sought the recognition he believed he deserved. He killed his father with the weird glowing rock, causing terrifying alterations to his body, and when his clan tried to punish him for the murder, he killed them as well. His clan had taken the meteor as proof of the sun's goodness, but as Vander's life extended to superhuman proportions, his religious views would become more sophisticated, and he would execute intricate ritual sacrifices in honor of the deities he honored for his gift of immortality. Vander attempted to establish empires, but all of his endeavors failed, which irritated him. Vander traveled west, eventually becoming associated with the Vandals and earning the moniker, Vandal Savage. Following Camelot's most recent collapse, Vander found himself in the settlement of Little Spring, where he unwittingly founded the Demon Knights, which later became Stormwatch. Vandal traveled through the centuries learning new things and causing death and despair in the same way. He had gotten tired of such things by modern times and had become civilized. Despite this, he continued to commit crimes and disliked being dominated by weaklings. Lex approached him, and Vandal consented because he had learned on his adventure that the Earth was in danger, that a storm was on its way, and that they might not survive it or face annihilation. Humanity has to acquire a new level of power and depart the current solar system. Vandal was cold to strangers, but he wasn't a recluse. He desired to live and rule over his people in a place filled by his people. The group's final member was Queen Bee, whose name was Zazala. Queen Bee Zazala of Coral is an interplanetary conqueror. Zazala, the leader of the hive world Coral, lived solely for her species' interplanetary expansion. She was not, however, immortal and could die in old age. Queen Zazala assembled an army of bee-men to seek an immortality potion for herself. She first put them to the test by having them pillage several worlds. On Earth, however, they were defeated by the Justice League. Zazala realized that fighting directly would cause enormous damage to her people after seeing the heroes of the globe through the bees on the planet. As a result, she resolved to be patient and eliminate her opponents from within. She took control of a human leader's thoughts and assisted the country in becoming powerful. Lex was drawn to her wrath and power, and she joined the organization, which made her goal much simpler. Otherwise, she would have gradually taken over all of the world's leaders. Zazala was a formidable entity with a regal demeanor. She was intimidating and expected others' devotion. She considered humans to be a lower species, but that changed as a result of the light. Every member was unique, and they possessed the capacity to dominate the globe as a group. On Earth, their adversaries included the Justice League, Titans, the United States government, the Russian government, the Chinese government, and, lastly, Merlin's Stormwatch. Returning to the scene, the members had finished watching the conflict and were quiet, with the exception of the chatty ones. They were taking in and studying what they had seen. Their actions were considered and deliberate, rather than rash, because mistakes were not tolerated. For such a thing, the majority of them were perfectionists. Losing Centurion to Naruto was no problem because they already possessed his DNA. They had thoroughly researched the individual and could easily create a clone, especially with the assistance of Clarion, who could handle the spiritual aspect if there was a problem. Despite this, none of them anticipated a problem because Centurion's power was the result of an ancient scientist's experiment. It was quite disappointing, but that man has piqued my interest. Is he really the will of humanity? Zazala said, rubbing her lips and watching Naruto carefully on the screen. If it was true, his existence put her in a bind and made her jealous. She had never witnessed anything like that for her people or any other being. So, why was mankind so fortunate? She was already concerned about the heroes, but the newcomer may utterly derail her strategy. Can it be managed? Zazala considered mind-controlling Naruto in order to entirely dominate all of humanity like she did her people. Everyone was thinking about her question. Was he indeed the will of humanity, or were his words hollow? What do you think? Have you heard anything about this before? Lex questioned, referring to the members by their codename, their first initial. He, like everyone else, was intrigued and deep in contemplation. Because of his advanced age and arduous voyage, he approached Vandal. Vandal had pondered this subject since learning about the man, but nothing seemed to click. He'd never heard of anything like it. No, I haven't come across anything like that. Perhaps it has evolved a fully conscious in recent years. Vandal responded while pacing around the Naruto hologram after the members had finished watching the combat and decided to focus on one person. Neither of the other members had anything to say about him. As a result, there was no previous information about him. Lex directed everyone's attention to his data after bringing it to the forefront. The light could analyze humans and other things from the safety of their base using their high-tech system installed in the Lex Corp satellite. The technology was obtained from Darkseid prior to his invasion, and it was finally being properly exploited by the organization. He doesn't have a flesh body, but he replicates everything with pure energy of some kind. Or maybe he can only form in that way. As he examined the data, Ultra-Humanite mumbled. His energy levels are nearly equal to those of our planet. The danger level is high. How does he stack up against our main adversaries? As he compared the data to others, Brain mumbled. He has less energy than Superman and Green Lantern. But is this all there is to it? He looked to be everywhere at once, so that could be a misreading. Regardless, this information will not assist us in determining his origin. It's possible that we'll need to contact him. Ross Al Ghul added, looking at Naruto. He could see that the man was a warrior, but it didn't make him any less human because he was supposed to represent humanity's will. Good point, but we might need to put him through some tests first. His goal is identical, but he may be too difficult to handle even if his remarks are false. Lex agreed with him, but he didn't appreciate Naruto's tone. If they ever met, it seems that he would be treated like a dog. None of them could disagree because Naruto had openly stated so on television. How do we put him to the test? What if he was genuinely the will, and we ended up digging our own graves? Manta spoke out and pointed out the dangers. There is only one danger: slavery. He has publicly stated that everyone gets a second opportunity, and his approach reflects this. We don't have to be afraid of him at first. The second contact is where we risk death. Deathstroke disagreed with Manta's understanding of the issue and corrected him. Both were members of the group, although there was always some rivalry between them.
Allow me to play with him, guys. I'm going to make him sing right away. Clarion offered with a smile, as he, too, found the enigma intriguing and eager to solve it. The offer was appealing, but there was the issue of Dr. Fate becoming involved if Clarion was spotted. Let us then plan the meeting. We need to give Clarion some time to prove himself before allowing others to meddle. Ross grumbled as he pulled out a list of enemy forces for the members to plan for. They all planned, but none of them wanted to talk about the potential of failure. They were all adamant about their beliefs and refused to submit. To be continued.
That's it for Spectate. Thanks for listening to this video. I hope you did enjoy this part of the story. And if you did, like, share, and subscribe for more. And thank you all for helping support and have a great day.